The following program is paid for and furnished by its producer, host, and sponsors. And with that, we say it's time for the Mike Diederich radio program. And we say good morning to Mike and guests.
Steve, how are you today?
So far, I'm pretty good, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the seatbelt story. I remember those days when we had to shift.
Yeah.
I was part of that generation that had to get used to wearing belts.
Yeah.
So, good morning. For the viewers, I'm Mike Diederich.
Well, listeners.
Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, they can view it, but all they'll see is the radio. That's all.
I'd have to go online. To the listeners, Mike Diederich. I'm running for district attorney in the county on the independent line, row I on the ballot, which is the Serve Rockland line. I'm running because my opponent is on the Democratic and Republican and conservative lines. He received about 99% of the ultra-Orthodox bloc vote, which got him on the Democratic Party line. He's a lifelong Democrat, so I'm not really sure why he's on the Republican and Conservative Party lines. But in any case, I had a grassroots group of people that were able to get me enough signatures to get me on the ballot. So I'm running as a independent candidate on the Serve Rockland line. Now there's another line, row H, which is the Serve America line, otherwise known as SAM. So there's a bunch of candidates in the county that are on the SAM line, and those are Democrats and Republicans and independents who realize that we're having too much polarization in our politics today, and we need people in office who are going to pay less attention to the political interests and more attention to the people. And I have two guests with me for later in the show who are running as independents on row I. So I'll have them introduce themselves shortly. I saw a very inspirational story yesterday about Dr. Greg Semenza, who is from Queens, like my mother, grew up in Westchester. I grew up until age 4 in Westchester, then migrated over here to Rockland County. And he went to the public schools, Sleepy Hollow, had a great high school biology teacher, a Rose Nelson, who he credits with sparking his interest in science. And that interest was so great that he ended up becoming a physician and a PhD. And then, like I said, he was just awarded a Nobel Prize in medicine for his research regarding oxygenation of cells and how that might prevent things like cancer and other illnesses. So it's an inspirational story of what public schools can do. I'm a product of the public schools. I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize. Not trying, but it's inspirational about what education can do. How that relates to voting, somebody made a nice comment for me yesterday. He said we have block voting and blindfolded voting, and I've been a critic of block voting in that I think it reflects a group of people who are listening too much to leaders of the group and not enough to their own knowledge and information and education on who to vote for in a election. And then we have blind voting, or I think more properly called blindfolded voting, and that's where people go to the ballot box, but they really don't know who they're voting for because they haven't done the research. They haven't read up on candidates. They haven't studied the issues. And those are people who are really voting in ignorance, and that's not good. We really need in our society people who are informed and educated about what's going on in the society, and to bring that information and that education to bear when they go into the voting booth on election day. Now, the issues I'm trying to raise are, I think, very significant. I think there's, in many respects, profound issues facing the county and our way of life, and that's why I decided to run for district attorney. I am of the view that I have a very unique set of skills and experience, including my practicing law for many, many years. I practice employment law and civil rights law now, but I've been a criminal prosecutor as an Army lawyer. I've been a criminal defense counsel. I've done pursued taxpayer lawsuits on behalf of the taxpayers of the county. I've been involved in environmental litigation from the very start of my legal career when I was involved with the Indian Point licensing. And as I indicated before, I've done 29 years in the Army Reserves with tours of duty in Germany for 3 years, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I'm a strong believer in our democracy and our Bill of Rights and the rights of all people, including rights of free speech, and as relevant to our county today, the right to practice your religion, and also the right of the people to have religion be separate from governance. So the issues I've decided I can take on more effectively than the other candidate are things like, for example, what we perceive to be rampant fraud, public corruption, rampant public corruption in the county, and in particular in Ramapo. We've seen that with Supervisor St. Lawrence going to prison. We've seen it with many other things, and it's a problem that looks like it's systemic, and it's something that I feel I can address. I'm willing to address. I have the background, experience, and the independence to address public corruption wherever it might be. I'm politically independent, which means I'm not going to worry about who the political interests are. If they're Democrat, Republican, anything else, if they do wrong and violate the trust the people have given them, I'll prosecute them. Other issues that we have in the county in the news recently have been whether we have an epidemic of Medicaid and welfare fraud. Many people are raising that issue. I'm going to address it. I was going to have on my program today Hilda Kogut, an FBI agent. We're going to move that appearance to next week, but we're going to discuss public welfare fraud and abuse. They're not exactly the same. Fraud is a crime, and abuse is something that might be better dealt with by legislation. But we're going to address the issues of Medicaid and welfare fraud. There have been a lot of people saying things, alleging things, and as DA, I'm going to get to the bottom of what's truth and what's fact and what's fiction, because it's important to know what the actual evidence is, and if there is a real problem, how to address it. Right now, over 50% of the county of Rockland budget is Medicaid payment related, and it's an expense that's growing probably exponentially. So it's something that needs to be addressed. Another very important topic of concern is in the realm of housing, zoning, fire codes, and ignoring fire and safety codes, and whether zoning is fair, whether it's discriminatory, whether it's implemented in a way that's transparent to the public, as opposed to zoning that's implemented through behind-the-scenes deals or influence or even outright corruption. Those are important things. The people have to have a feeling that their governmental officials are actually doing the right thing and not doing things behind their backs. At the same time, everyone is entitled to fair and safe housing, and we want to make sure that all people of the county are protected and treated fairly. Part of the irresponsible. Oh yeah, Steve.
You have a phone call, Mike.
Okay, yeah. Do we have a question from a viewer?
Yes, I'd like to ask you, what's your position on people that claim, I don't know, poverty's not the word, but some people we understand have 6 or 7 children, are not married because they are not married in the eyes of the law.
WRCR.
And they're getting public assistance because they're, claiming that they're unwed mothers with 6 kids, and now we're getting Section 8 housing, food stamps, and all this kind of things. What's your position on that?
Well, like I was saying, as DA, I'm going to be trying to figure out separate fact from fiction. And I've heard this, basically, accusation, it's going around, and it's the subject of so much discussion that, for example, one of the Orthodox groups put on their website a disclaimer saying this is not a problem, and their website says that based upon census reports, 99 or so percent of the community is wed. Now, as a lawyer, I looked at that statement and I said to myself, census reporting is confidential. So what you say in your census that I'm married doesn't mean that I'm telling the village. Yes, exactly. So I don't know at all to what extent there's a problem there.
But isn't there any kind of background checks done on social services to determine the legality of the claim? I mean, it seems like, and I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic here, please understand that, but it seems like this is prevalent in some areas, and either it is or it isn't. I mean, it's been going on for years. Claims have been made, people have accusations, but yet it doesn't seem to come to a fruition or to a head to say, yes, we're okay, or no, we're not okay.
I'm going to have an announcement this week regarding a plan for approaching these issues to investigate and evaluate the types of problems we have now. For example, Section 8 housing, I looked at the form, and as you point out, it doesn't really, there's no race or religion or ethnic category. I look at the forms that people fill out, and it looks to me like there's not sufficient disclosure for the purposes of the public. The public want people to actually need the benefits, and if the forms don't require enough information that there can be abuse, the forms need to be changed. And as DA, as I've said before, I take a broad view of the office. In other words, if there's a problem that is not necessarily criminal in nature but needs addressing, I'm going to refer that problem to the appropriate authorities, whether they're our legislators, state legislators, or county legislators to implement proper adjustment, or to civil authorities, for example.
Well, wouldn't that be a crime, though?
Well, if not, no.
Making claims that you're entitled to something which you're legally not entitled to?
Well, it depends. Like I said, if the form doesn't, if you're not required to state whether or not you're married on the form, then you're not lying on a form. If you are, if the form does require it, and then you lie, or if you lie to a law enforcement person, that's a different issue.
Okay, all right, good. All right, well, it's just something that, you hit a nerve there when you were talking about fraud and misuse of the system and stuff. And I know I'm not against helping people who really require it, but sometimes you wonder, is it going in the right direction? You look at our budget here, the legislature is going to have to look at this budget that the executive put out, and there's a lot of money going to social services.
It's a huge amount of money, and it needs to be addressed, and that's why I said, as DA, I'm going to be looking at it both from a systemic point of view. Is there organized fraud? Organizing people to perpetrate frauds on the system, or individual fraud, of course. And also, is there abuse that doesn't rise to the criminal level, but something that I can refer to appropriate other authorities.
All right. Well, good. Well, I support you and will vote for you, and I wish you good luck. I know you got a steep uphill fight to go against here with this in this county, but hopefully we're spreading the word about you, and we can maybe get you elected.
I appreciate it. And to the listeners, as I indicated, I'm running on row I, which is at the very bottom of the ballot. And as I indicated regarding blindfolded voting, a lot of people are going to be inclined to just vote for their political party that they normally vote for. Here, the Democratic candidate is also the Republican candidate. So please tell your family and friends, if they want independence in the DA's office, to go to the bottom of the ballot to vote on row I, the Serve Rockland line, and also to consider the candidates that are independent in this race, including...
You have one more call, Mike.
Yes.
Hello, Mike.
Yes.
How you doing?
Good. What's your question?
Quick question. I apologize if it's a little bit similar to the last question, but all the fraud, corruption, everything that's been happening in Rockland County, mainly Ramapo, for the past 10, 20 years, it's good to hear what you will be doing about it. But I was just wondering if you knew why it has fell through the cracks for so long, when there's so many people, not just the district attorney, but higher up, that should be able to, find out what's happening and find the illegal happenings that's happening in Rockland.
It's the combination of political interests of the politicians on both sides of the aisle, and it's the power of, as far as certain groups, for example, the block vote has a tremendous influence and power over our politics, and it's growing by the day exponentially. So we need the public to speak up and say, you know what, it's not politics as usual anymore. We need independent people in government who will represent us, and that's why I need people to come out and help me tell other people to vote on row I. That's the only way I'm going to get elected, is to get people helping me, campaign contributions so we can spread the word, and getting out my political literature so people can know what I'm about, and to realize they have to go to the bottom of the ballot to vote on row I in order to have things improve in our county. Okay, I have a couple guests who are independent candidates. Joe Carlin is running for village trustee for the village of Nyack. He's running as an independent on the row I line with me. Joe, how are you today?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Tell the listeners something about yourself.
Okay, so as Mike said, my name is Joe Carlin. I am an independent Democrat, and I'm running on row I under the Nyack Unity Party. I'm very concerned about what's been happening in the village of Nyack. My major issues are development, but not necessarily to the extent that we see in the rest of the county. But we have had a past village administrations which have relaxed the zoning codes, which basically have allowed a lot of developers to come in, to do tear downs, to basically put up buildings which are above and beyond what the village can support. So I'm advocating for a building moratorium. After the explosion of all these developments that have either been started or have gone through the approval process, I want to hit pause. I want to hit pause to consider the effects on the village with a view towards revising our zoning codes and beefing up our village code enforcement team. I'm also looking to increase the affordable housing and tenant protections in the village. One of the problems over the past few years is that the village has basically relaxed the affordable housing requirements from 20% down to 10%, and they've even given developers an option to go into a buyout fund. In other words, instead of providing the physical apartments, they can provide a sum of money, which basically right now it's $50,000 per apartment that they would have given. And that goes into a village fund, which basically nobody knows what's going to happen to that money. But the problem is that it's a no-brainer for developers. Instead of having to provide affordable housing, They make a one-time payment of $50,000, and that's it. And problem also is that all the developments going up in the village are basically luxury apartments. And they're pushing out the people who cannot afford this out of the town. And it's also going to raise rents in the other areas of the village.
Now, sorry.
Yeah.
No, these are, now, I'll let you go on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did want to point out, I invited your competitors on the show, and similar to my own race, I'm not hearing from my competitors, and your competitors could have been here, and I think maybe there's an attitude, if you're on a major party line, you don't need to think about or worry about independent candidates. I think independent candidates are the candidates that are going to make a difference this election. The SAM party line candidates on row H and we on row I. What do you think about that?
Well, certainly, in the village of Nyack, and I can only speak for the village of Nyack, they say all politics is local, and it's in the village it's hyper-local. Out of a group of probably 4,700 registered voters, 2,700 are registered Democrats, and the remainder are non-Democrats. They're either Republican, Independent, Conservative, Green, or no party affiliation. And a lot of people in the village feel disenfranchised from actually having a voice in village government because the Democratic Party has a basically majority in terms of the amount of people that turn out and do the voting. So I want to give voice to the disenfranchised, both Democrats and non-Democrats.
So you've been out shaking a lot of hands, I presume.
A lot of hands, yeah. My hands are raw now. I have to use some cream on them because I haven't kissed any babies yet, though.
Well, when I ran for legislature and lost by 9 votes, I won every district in my town in Stony Point, and in Stony Point, it was a hell of a lot of handshaking, getting to know the people, and when people meet you and hear about you at the local level, that's where party makes really no difference. Where they look at the person for your integrity and what you, if they believe what you're going to do and your sincerity, and that is what I think gets votes. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Like for instance, I ran in the Democratic primary back in June. I did garner around 320 votes. Which, if you look at the total amount of people, which is pitiful, the amount of people that actually turned out to vote, out of the 2,700 registered Democrats, only about 750 Democrats actually came and voted. So I actually garnered, I would say, around 45%, but because it was a 3-person race for 2 spots, it didn't cut it. It's people have to get involved. People have to actually go and exercise their right to go and vote. If they don't do it, then they can't complain.
And what do you think about the people's view of what a DA can do for them in the county? Well,
absolutely. A DA is very important. As you mentioned, there have been issues with regard to corruption. Not anything in the village of Nyack. I don't believe there's any corruption at all. But in other areas, certainly there are issues which zoning, building code enforcement, and so forth. I think that's something that a DA can be very helpful and assist us in making sure that everybody is on the up and up.
I have to point out to the listeners that I'm running for a countywide office. There's a lot more voters to reach, and I can't meet everybody or even a major fraction myself. I need people to go out and help me get my word out by distributing my literature, by pointing to my various writings on the web, and to get the word out that I'm running as an independent, and that we have independents running that people should really consider for this election, and to vote high, the H row and the I row this election. Vote high, which is the lowest spot in the ballot, but it'll get you the highest results. Okay, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Good luck.
Thank you. And now I have my plumber, and I don't mean in a Watergate sense, literally my plumber. Kevin Nolan has a plumbing business in Stony Point, and He's my plumber. And he's running as independent on the Serve Rockland line, row I. Welcome this morning.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Tell the listeners about yourself. And by the way, the invitation I have is open to all candidates, so Kevin's opponents are welcome on my show as well. Kevin, tell us about yourself.
Well, I never really followed local politics until recently, and sort of just by chance, a few months back, obviously you know the story, I ran into you through a plumbing issue that you had, and we started talking and decided to say, hey, why don't we start this Serve Rockland and run together. Thought it was a phenomenal idea. Very tough, obviously, to run as an independent. You have no help from committee members or party chairman. You just sort of got to figure everything out by yourself.
And I hear you're doing a great job on social media and getting out there and shaking hands. Tell the people about that.
Well, I'm definitely trying to spread the word. There's plenty of help. There's a lot more people paying attention today, thanks to social media. There's community groups out there that do a very good job. There's obviously one of my favorite, Making Rockland Great Again, which is usually a non-political group, does some very good things. You have Clarkstown, What They Don't Want You to Know, the Clarkstown Uncensored community page, really bring up important issues, that a lot of major party line candidates can't really discuss. They have to toe their party line agenda. And I think it's a good thing that you have candidates on independent lines that can, that can really do their own thing and sort of make a change without always asking for, for permission.
And what do you see as the biggest issues facing our town, Stony Point?
Well, see, Stony Point does not have the same issues as Ramapo. Obviously, no town in the county wants to be the next town of Ramapo. What's gone on there, and it's not just by one group of people. This is an effort by everybody in Ramapo, from government leadership to developers to and community members to that effect.
Well, it seems to me in Ramapo you have too much non-transparency. You have zoning board meetings and planning board meetings where you don't have proper agendas in advance, and then minutes, from what I hear and is reported, the minutes are either not prepared or not well prepared. And these are transparency issues. It seems to me in Stony Point we have a pretty transparent local government. Our supervisor seems to be doing a good job. He's a Republican. And like I've said before, I'm a Democrat, independent Democrat, but I'll applaud Republicans, Democrats, anybody doing a good job, and I'll criticize anyone doing a poor job. So what do you think are the important issues for Stony Point?
Well, I mean, I agree that I think our supervisor does an excellent job. The problem is we've had numerous, obviously we had the Mirror, shut down, which has cost our school district a tremendous amount of money. It cost our town a tremendous amount of money. Tilcon is vacant. The gypsum plant has closed and sits idle. Everybody is so afraid of overdevelopment, yet it's sort of hindering, the fact that we need to bring something in to assist homeowners in Stony Point. And I don't see that being done. Opportunities to reach out and work, with the Rockland County Industrial Development Agency or the Rockland County Economic Development Corp. They're just being missed. Or so much is being done in other parts of the county, but in Stony Point, it's just not happening for some reason.
And it seems to me, again, one of the reasons I'm running, it seems to me our legislators, for example, on both sides of the aisle, are creating a dysfunctional legislature, and they're not really addressing the needs of the people. You can't stop progress, and overdevelopment is a term which is relative, but I'm for opposing irresponsible development. We need sound land use planning so people, the public, knows what is envisioned and what helps satisfy the needs of all the people. That's my view, that we need transparent governance, that people can see what the government's doing and that it's proper and for the benefit of everyone.
I couldn't agree more, Mike.
Now, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, so Kevin has a plumbing business in Stony Point. I have my law practice. I do employment law, civil rights, and we're both trying our best to get into office as independents. Do any other callers, Steve? Okay, so we're going to wrap up the program. Any other questions, Joe?
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I want to wish you good luck, and to Kevin, good luck in your races. I think it's good that independents, we need to have more people get involved in politics in the county, and for me, in the village. And I think it's only a good thing.
It's very difficult to run. It's very expensive. So please, people, if you like a candidate, open up your wallets and give a political contribution, and also get involved in helping hand out leaflets, hand out materials, telling people on social media. You know, that's what democracy needs, and needs conversation. That's what the First Amendment provides for. Conversation, so people can understand who's running and why they should vote for particular people. So I think that concludes the programs. Steve, thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. We'll see you next week. Mike Diederich, 4th District Attorney, paid for